Good morning and welcome to today's Downtown Aviation Economy and Innovation Subcommittee. This is the subcommittee for June 2017. My name is Daniel Valenzuela. I'm honored to chair this subcommittee, the council member for District 5. I'm joined by my colleagues, Zelda Williams, Councilwoman Williams from District 1, Vice Mayor Laura Pastor from District 4, and to my far left, Councilman Nowakowski from District 7. The first thing we do with this particular subcommittee, and also the last thing we do, is we have a call to the public. Want to be sure that the public realizes and knows that they have the first and last word when it comes to this subcommittee and how we do business in the city of Phoenix. And up front, we don't have any cards. Okay, so we'll move on to approving the minutes of meetings.
I'd move approval of April 26th and May 3rd minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We do have a consent agenda, items 3 through 6. Any of my colleagues would like to take one out to discuss, we can do that. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Items 3 through 6 on the consent, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving forward to item 7, Airport Economic Impact Study Update.
Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, this item was provided as information in your packet. No presentation was planned.
Thank you, Mr. Blue. Any questions from my colleagues on item 7? Everyone does have the information in their packet.
All good.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make the comment how great it is that this airport provides, is it $38 billion annually to this state and this community. So good job at the airport, and thanks staff for doing such a wonderful job.
Great comment. Thank you, Councilwoman. Anything else from my colleagues? Okay, this is, again, information only, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the FAA flight path update. This has been a standing item on this subcommittee for more than a year and a half now, as we continue to work through the issues with the federal government on the flight. These are the flight path issues. We decided to make this a standing item again for the last year and a half or so, where people can come out and get the latest, voice their frustrations, concerns, and of course offer ideas as we move forward. So thank you for joining us for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Not a lot of updates on the specific noise issue, but Mr. Feld will discuss an evolving issue with respect to air traffic control generally throughout the nation, and some of our comments about the proposal to corporatize air traffic control.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Very quickly, 2 other quick updates. No news on the lawsuit, still waiting a decision there, and no news on the National Defense Authorization Act, which, as you recall, had some provisions in there for the FAA to re-examine environmental impacts here in Phoenix. So Mr. Bennett alludes to, this is Infrastructure Week. President Trump on Monday morning kicked off Infrastructure Week with a release of a set of guiding principles to privatize air traffic management in the United States, which might seem odd, but it's actually not that uncommon. The United Kingdom and Canada both have privatized models of air traffic management, as do other countries. In fact, even locally, contract tower operators control local airspace at Goodyear as well as Mesa Gateway Airport. But there still remains concerns, and that is why you'll see most airport cities, in fact, the airport industries like AAAE and ACI remain neutral on this because the devil's in the details. And so while the guiding principles help us understand how the initial corporation would be formed and what their roles would be, and clearly divorcing safety oversight from operating in any industry has some efficiencies to it, but it does not, it's not clear how communities will be able to access this process or provide input in a privatized model. So that remains an unknown detail that we'll continue to monitor as this evolves. Finally, there is no legal authority with these guiding principles. It would still have to be taken up by Congress through either FAA reauthorization or some other bill. So at the moment, it's policy guidance to U.S. Congress. Happy to answer any questions or address any concerns.
Vice Mayor?
So my understanding in the airport industry, they have tried to privatize over years, many years. And so I think it was 2012, 2013 where the real conversation started with the air traffic controllers. And so this has been in the works for quite many years. And so it is not a new idea or standard. It is now happening to be moving the way it's moving because it's been prepped for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years. Am I?
Mr. Chairman, to Vice Mayor Pastor, that is correct. It's actually been around through several administrations in one form or the other. And so it never has really progressed as far as it has recently, because right now, most of the airlines are in favor of it.
Right.
And even the Air Traffic Controllers Union is in favor of it. From the airport perspective and from the Phoenix perspective, our concerns are if you corporatize this institution, the airport industry or the communities need to have a seat on that governing board of directors so that we can provide policy guidance, and communities need to have the ability to weigh in on and influence any proposed changes to flight paths into and around their communities.
So I'm making a big assumption that all those details will be worked out and that the announcement is here, but the way bureaucracy in Congress moves, it probably we'll see it another 2 or 3 years where we're really starting to understand what the details are and be able to then have a voice of saying, we would like to see these things.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor, I think that sounds right. In other countries, it has generally taken 5 to 7 years to actually stand up the formal policies and complete the implementation.
And this will not affect our lawsuit.
Not at all.
Just want to get it on the record. It's all over next door, everywhere else, and so I just want it on the record that this doesn't impact the lawsuit. Thank you.
Councilman Nowakowski?
Is there a way for us to actually write to our congressmen and our senators our concerns, that making sure that the community is represented? I think that they need to hear from us now before they start a debate on that, so they can see that we as the airport, we as the city of Phoenix do have some concerns, and we want to make sure that our community is going to be heard and that has a seat at the table as you instructed.
We'll prepare correspondence to that effect.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by my colleagues? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. We'll move on to item 9. Keep you at the table here, Mr. Bennett. Air Service Development Consultant Services, RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. Today, would like to discuss our recommendation concerning air service development support. One of the best ways that we can make sure that we're serving the travelers in our community is to make sure that we have this critical intelligence about where our customers want to fly, how often they fly, what airlines they want to fly on, and then be able to make the best case to those airlines for service. And it's not about perhaps attracting all new service, but it's also about improving the existing service that we have. And we do this by using the resources of other firms that provide us with data, industry insights, and help us form our strategy guidance on approaching carriers about improving service to Phoenix. In terms of data, these air service development companies that we work with, they have access to all kinds of data, and they crunch, I mean, a lot of information about flights and the trends that passengers portray, such as where these passengers are flying, how often they fly, what class of service they're buying, how much they're paying for their tickets. And then all of this intelligence and information helps us form our strategic approach to how to go after additional service or improve service. Now, these experts that offer us this guidance and help us access this information, they live this on a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week basis, and they stay completely in tune with our industry as well as with the airlines and airports around the world. And they're able to help us understand what is happening in other airports, how they've approached various airlines, what internal changes are happening in the airline industry with respect to even management changes within those industries, and how that might impact our ability to improve service either positively or negatively. And then also what legislative or regulatory changes are taking place in the global market that could influence our ability to attract service. And then after we've gone through this process of understanding the data and gaining these insights, then these firms help us to develop a strategy to make sure that we're adequately monitoring the data and then being able to accurately assess the demand for air transportation here and then what service opportunities that might present. And then we devise and maintain that strategy to, once again, improve air service in the Phoenix market. So earlier this year, the council authorized us to issue a request for proposals to solicit firms to help us in this analysis. And over the years, we've used many firms here in Phoenix. In fact, for the past 25 years, we've probably used 4 or 5 different firms in this effort to support our research. And we had 4 firms that responded to the proposal, and 2 of these firms, as represented here, scored significantly higher than the other 2 in the process. And we had an interview panel that conducted interviews with these 2 firms, and following the conclusion of the quantitative as well as the oral interviews, the panel recommended that we actually solicit and select both of these firms to assist us in this effort, because one of the firms has a little stronger influence and a presence in the European theater, and another firm is a little stronger in the Asian theater, and we feel that by combining access to both of these firms, we would have the best of both talent pools. So our recommendation to the subcommittee today is that we enter into an agreement with the 2 previous firms, Campbell Hill and Intervistas, in an amount not to exceed $750,000 per year. And happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment.
Councilwoman?
Thank you. I appreciate the information, Jim. I have been fortunate enough to go with some of these consultants to different airlines around the world. And I know that at each visit we have made, we've had a representative with us. And the airline always had wanted information about Phoenix, which staff, usually Debo is who I've met with lately, had all the information about Phoenix, but they really challenged and asked more about data, wanted to know what our expertise was about the airline industry as a whole. And the consultants played a key role, not only preparing us to go in there, but they could answer many of the difficult questions. And I know in a couple of cases I can think of, impressed the airline representatives that they knew, we knew the real story and what was going on in the world. So I understand the need for this expertise. And I am delighted to hear you have one for Europe and one for Asia, because we continue to target those 2 markets and want to expand into Europe and get our first route to Asia. So I'm very supportive of this, and I would move approval.
Great, we do have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Any other comments? Councilman Nowakowski?
Thank you. I think it's a great opportunity for us to tell our story and to really find out what story to tell. I know that I've been on some missions to Mexico, talking to Ario Mexico and Volaris, and just the information that we're able to provide to them as a selling tool is so crucial. The other thing is, are they going to be looking at like the U.S. Customs? Because I mean, one of the things that we hear is that the times that airlines can actually fly in, that our customs are open or not open, maybe making some recommendation to the U.S. Customs to be open different hours or even expanded to maybe other terminals. And the other thing too is, how about the service of the TSA, just to make sure that if there's something on our side of it that we can improve, that we can actually do that. I know when I fly out of different airports, especially like Las Vegas, I mean, it's a nightmare. You stand in lines and lines of TSA. So if there's any way for us to actually make the visit more comfortable, that'd be great information to have also.
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Nowakowski, a couple of points on the question about Customs and Border Protection. We actually have entered into an agreement with Customs and Border Protection that gives us the flexibility to shift their hours to accommodate flights, should we be fortunate enough to get one at an off hour. So we have that capability to shift hours to accommodate that flight. And then with respect to TSA, we also continue a very strong partnership with TSA and are working on ways to improve the throughput at all of our checkpoints. These firms will advise us on that, but in terms of the direct interaction with those two agencies, that would come from aviation staff.
Now, a follow-up question. Will this just be focusing on Sky Harbor or other airports that we actually manage, which Deer Valley, maybe Goodyear, and Mesa?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Nowakowski, the focus on this for commercial air service development is only at Sky Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. I think this is a very positive investment, and it's a very competitive world, especially our airports and how you understand them. I would argue that no one on the council is more knowledgeable of how this works than you, Councilwoman Williams. So thank you for working so diligently in this field, in this area. When we go out and we compete with hundreds of other airports for their business, they expect us to know not only the aviation industry, but they expect us to know about Phoenix, our demographics, our what's driving our economy, who is flying out in and out of Phoenix, and we are now the 5th largest city in the country. Obviously, our population is growing. Our economy is more diversified. We have, all 3 public universities, as an example, have a campus in downtown Phoenix. Downtown is different. And so as we continue to evolve and continue to be this world-class city, we need to have the latest information so that we can attract some of these flights. So I'm very supportive of this. I'm glad we're doing it. Again, it is an investment. So we do have a motion and a second. We'll go to the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. All right, we'll move on to item 10, and we have several people here who'd like to participate and weigh in. It's always a good thing. So we'll ask Alan Stevenson and his team to join us. Group Home Facilities Text Amendment.
Thank you, Chairman Valenzuela and members of the subcommittee. I do have with me Trish Gomes, the zoning administrator, and Rosel Escalar, the project manager for our group home text amendment. The purpose of this text amendment is to ensure compliance with the Federal Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act, to add a reasonable accommodation to our zoning ordinance that will comply with federal law, as well as modernizing our definitions and regulations to conform with state industry standards. The group home sections of the zoning ordinance haven't been updated since the 60s, and so our nomenclature was very dated, and the industry had evolved and terminology had evolved, and that's one of the major things you'll see in here in terms of changes, and then also the reasonable accommodation provisions that we'll talk about here in depth in a few moments. So again, we just talked about those things. It's really about ensuring clarity, compliance, and consistency with our regulations and modernizing that terminology. With that, I will turn this over to Trish, who's going to talk about the reasonable accommodation provisions.
Chairman Valenzuela, members of the subcommittee, the reasonable accommodation is really the impetus for this text amendment in order for us to comply with federal regulations. As you know, the enforcement of the spacing requirements was suspended until that reasonable accommodation provision could be developed. It has resumed as of May 15th, this year, since we did have the language and we were going through the public process. There has been several meetings and outreach efforts that have taken place starting back in October of last year with the stakeholder meetings, which included the regulating agencies such as the Arizona Department of Health Services and group home facility operators and organizations. All 15 village planning committees have had an opportunity to review the proposed language and provide recommendations. Neighborhood leader meetings were held as directed by the Planning Commission in March and April, where staff provided overview of the text amendment and had an opportunity to listen to community concerns. In May of this year, a Planning Commission had an opportunity to review and made a recommendation of approval of Addendum A, which included the community input and revisions to that text. We are here today for a recommendation of the subcommittee and to the full council on June 21st.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good morning, council members and vice mayor. So there were several concerns that we heard at meetings that we held, village planning committee meetings, community meetings, and planning commission. The primary concern early on was the change in the number of residents that we required for registration and spacing. We were initially proposing to only have registration and spacing for homes with 7 to 10 residents. So that would leave the homes with 1 to 6 residents without registration. However, we have in our new revised text amendment went back to our current requirement of registration and spacing for the 6 to 10 homes with 6 to 10 residents. Also a concern was that we have no spacing for homes with 1 to 5 residents. So there's concerns about clustering. Another concern is regarding our reasonable accommodation provisions, that they're too broadly applied and that we should not consider arterial streets and parks. So we have made some modifications there as well. Another concern is that these group homes should be treated as businesses in residential districts and have some form of licensing. There's concerns, health and safety concerns, both with disabled residents and also in the neighborhood in general. There's concerns of overcrowding in the homes, general lack of oversight, and a lack of enforcement. Many times we also heard that group homes should be treated as a business, as I mentioned before, and that there should be some form of licensing or tax program. So based on the community input that we've heard so far, an additional internal city review, staff has recommended several revisions as outlined in Addendum A. These proposed revisions include updating the definitions for assisted living center and assisted living home to replace the term disabled with persons with a disability. We are also keeping the term rooming house. That'll be maintained in the definition section as well as Capital Mall Overlay District. The definition for sober living home has been revised to more closely match the state definition per the state statute. The number of residents within a registered care home, as I mentioned previously, will be maintained at 6 to 10 rather than the 7 to 10. And we've added language to make an exception for group homes for developmentally disabled to allow those homes with 6 residents. This is per the state statute. We're updating language to also clarify and strengthen enforceability. The separation features within the reasonable accommodation have been revised to remove arterial streets and change the open space criteria from 5 acres to 10 acres. Also, the appeal process for reasonable accommodation has been updated to include specific criteria, which is similar to the town of Gilbert's criteria.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, staff is recommending approval per the language in Exhibit A of the addendum staff report that was dated April 28, 2017. As part of that staff report, there's also language in there that directs the government relations team to work with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns and others to try and develop state regulations, principally around sober living homes. All the state regulates all other group homes. They have to get a license, but they do not currently regulate sober living homes. And I think that's one of the ones you'll hear from the neighbors in a few minutes that causes a lot of concern that there's no licensing and regulation about the internal care of folks and management of those types of facilities. And then also to support HR 472, which is a federal bill that looks at making it easier for local governments to regulate sober living homes. This is the first step in the process. We mentioned that we are going to be going to the full council on 6/21 to ask for approval of the overall ordinance. That will allow us to continue our enforcement that we started back up again earlier this month. At that time, we also will be asking for the council to endorse our contract for our outside consultant. And that is the law offices of Daniel Lauber. They are out-of-state group that has helped other communities like Prescott and other ones across the country develop sober living regulations. So they will work with our working group throughout the summer and staff to address this whole issue. And that is something that was done at the direction of the subcommittee last time. Councilman Valenzuela asked us to look at getting outside experts and putting together a study group to do that. They'll work on those long-term solutions. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alan. Thank all three of you for all the work that you put into this. So each of us have a packet. I think we've all been pretty close to this issue. And I believe Vice Mayor Pastor may have a motion. And
I
we
do have
can
a
entertain. And
motion.
of course, we have several cards we want to hear from everyone.
I do have a motion. I do want to also begin the conversation and open up the conversation in the sense of I know we have a lot of cards, that really, in our lens, and I'm going to use that we look at all residents of the city, which include residents in the sober living homes, and really, in a bigger picture, want to protect those residents in a sober living home and making sure that they're not being taken advantage, especially during a time where recovery is happening, and making sure that counseling and all the long-term, skills that we learn as we're recovering from an addiction. And addictions are hard. They're very hard. I have traveled with many family and friends through this process, and some fail, and we rally around them and pick them up and say, come on, and look to see what their need is at that time during that moment. So I just want to say that this is a very holistic way of approach that I'm looking at it. And we also have to protect our neighbors and our neighborhoods in the process. And so it's very important to understand we're in this together. But my motion is move to approve ZT8-22-08 per the revised Amendment A language, and to support the state and federal legislation for group homes, to work on language that will address residents' concerns regarding group homes with 1 through 5 residents, and to work with Group Home Working Committee and our outside consultant to review the reasonable accommodation provisions this summer for potential future revisions.
Okay, so we do have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. We can get to cards because we want to be sure before we take a vote. We hear from our constituents. Any questions or comments, or should I get to the cards after the motion? We're good with that? We'll start with Jeff Spellman. And Jeff, there are two people who donated their time to you. Now, everyone has the motion as well, so if you can choose to speak, or just, if you're in support, you can just let us know that you're in support, and we'll go to the next speaker. All right, Mr. Spellman, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairman Valenzuela and members of the subcommittee. Jeff Spellman, 2609 West Lane Avenue with Take Action Phoenix, known as TAP. We're here for a couple reasons today. Number one, to thank you. On April 28th, you heard from our group and our neighborhood leaders about this issue and concern about group homes throughout Phoenix. And we all came together under this umbrella of TAP. To tell you a little bit about TAP, TAP is not, we don't have any special interest. We are simply a group of neighborhood leaders from throughout Phoenix who kind of came across this issue independently and realized that it was a problem. And we all started working together and identifying what the issue was, what potential solutions were, how other communities approached this issue. And on April 28th, when we spoke to this group, your vision, your leadership directed staff to come up with the working group, to the revisions to the text amendment. So one, we're here to thank you for that. We're here in support of the text amendment as it's written. It's not perfect. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but it is a very good first step toward that. So we do support it as written for that reason. You'll probably hear from others in our group some flaws in the text amendment, but we trust that some of those flaws will be addressed through the work of the working group and ultimately coming back to you probably with some sort of a full-blown new ordinance on this sometime in the fall. That's our hope and expectation. I have a handout that I'm going to leave with you just to continue to remind you what's important. And as Vice Mayor Pastor stated so perfectly, it is first and foremost about the people that are trying to recover in these homes, whether it's from substance abuse or whether it's people that are being cared for with serious mental illnesses or whatever it is about them first. You will not find one person in TAP that says this is about me or I don't want this next to me. Nobody will say that in our group. We do expect that there is some consistency in how they're spaced throughout the community so that the whole intention of providing recovery and integration into the community happens in a way where neighborhoods don't become institutionalized by over-concentration of group homes in any one given area, because that defeats the whole purpose. So we're very happy. Planning Department staff has done an outstanding job in revising the text amendment, in working with the neighborhood leaders, in getting us ready for the first working group meeting that is coming on Monday, moving at the speed of light to contract a professional consultant who has worked with other communities like Prescott. We identified that as a model that seems to work well for that community and could work well in Phoenix. By contracting with that consultant to help us get it right, it was a very good decision, and we are very amazed at how quickly that process has moved, and we thank you for that. So important to us is keeping that maximum occupant unregistered homes at 5, and the text amendment does that. It also provides the reasonable accommodation guidelines, which gets the city back to enforcing the distance requirements. In fact, they've already started doing that, and that's amazing. And I think that's kind of contingent on your approval of the text amendment today and ultimately from the full city council. What isn't addressed is the registration of all the sober living homes, including the 1 to 5s, and implementing health and safety standards. That's probably the most important piece of it, getting those health and safety standards to protect those in recovery. So with that, we support the text amendment. We thank you for your leadership direction. We appreciate greatly the hard work of the staff and the many long hours and weekends that they've spent getting ready to get this process forward and coming to you today with this revised text amendment. And with that, I'm just going to leave this so we can keep this information front and center. If you go to our website, Take Action Phoenix, there is a plethora of resources there. When you talk about the dangers of people, not being treated correctly in the sober living homes and group home facilities, you will find horror story after horror story on our website, stories and news articles about the problems with unregistered, unlicensed, uncontrolled group homes and what happens in those facilities. We don't want that in Phoenix. So we're looking forward to the work that's going to happen over the course of the summer with the working group and being back before you in the fall with some more comprehensive solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Vice Mayor, did you want to clarify something?
I just wanted to clarify a comment, Jeff, is that the motion that I presented is to work on language that will address the residents' concern regarding group homes with 1 and 5.
That's correct.
I added that language in because I knew the concerns.
Yes,
And so that's the new motion.
yes.
And then,
Thank you for that clarification.
And then to work with the group home working committee and then the outside consultant to figure these pieces out.
I think
that
it's
work?
perfectly worded, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
She heard you the first time. She wanted to hear you say it again.
No.
But it was perfectly.
We support it. I think it's very well put together motion that addresses the concerns.
Mr. Chair, if I could insert, it would be helpful if the second to the original motion would accept the change in the motion, just so we can make sure.
No.
That was a part of the original.
Oh, it was there. I'm
That's
part of
sorry.
the
I
Vice Mayor's
misunderstood what
original
you were
motion.
saying.
It's part of my original I just wanted to add clarity to it since I read
Because
it.
there are concerns. We're going to continue to have these meetings, and there are concerns, and we do want to get it right. We are, all of us are committed. I want to thank our staff, Alan and your team. Everyone's committed, but to your point, this is a good starting point. I think we all agree there too. It's a good starting point. More has to happen, but we're moving succinctly. So
Thank you very much for your support and your leadership on this.
thank you for your leadership, Mr. Spellman. Okay, the next speaker also has a couple of people who've donating their time. Mr. Wally Graham. Good seeing you, Mr. Graham.
Good morning. My name is Wally Graham. I'm president of the Arcadia Osborne Neighborhood Association, but I'm here to speak for TAP, Take Action Phoenix. The reason I wanted to get up is I want to support the text amendment that has been motioned this morning. We have worked hard to get to this point. And the reason that I came today was I want to make sure that one of the flaws in the current TA is outlined, because we will be working hard this fall on the committee to see how we can provide the reasonable accommodation that I think was the intent. However, the flaw that is in the design of this text amendment needs to be highlighted, so we stay focused on it. And that flaw is on page 38 of the text amendment. I think I passed the handout out. And what it does is it provides in a way of disability accommodation, a way to really get around what we think is the separation amendment. Right now, the separation amendment is 1,320 feet. And as you all know from the last time I was down here, we talked about two homes that are being put up in the Arcadia area that are directly across the street from one another. Now, that was a surprise to everybody. What we want to make sure of is this page 38, page 39 of the text amendment does not get carried forward in a new ordinance. So one of the things that TAP will be pushing on as we sit at the table is we will be talking about what are the alternatives, what are the other options. Right now, in order for an applicant to get a reasonable accommodation, they might put their home next door to another home if they can, in fact, convince a hearing officer designated by the Director of Planning to do that. If the hearing officer denies their request, That request then goes to the Director of Planning, and he may, and it's written down at the bottom of this page, he may approve that despite what the hearing officer said, and case is closed. We have no option. We cannot find another way. There's nothing for neighborhoods to do if, in fact, the Director of Planning approves that exception. So we're asking that that be noted as a flaw that we want to take a look at in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good seeing you, Wally. Next, we have a couple of people who filled out cards. Would you like to say something?
Mr. Graham, that definitely is going to be looked at. Ellen Stevenson and I had a deep conversation yesterday regarding that, and I had asked if that could be part of the group discussion.
So we have two who filled out cards who wish not to speak. Lori Fitzhugh, who's been, thank you for, Lori is supporting, but thank you so much for your involvement also. And Michelle Seawick, am I saying that right? I hope. Sywick. I apologize. Michelle Sywick marked opposed, wishing not to speak. And the next speaker, and again, as I call your name, if you'd like to speak, we'd love to hear from you. If you feel like your point has been made, and if, you know, I think everyone else is marked in favor, you can just simply say that you're here in favor. Daryl Pennell, in favor? Would you like to speak, sir? Please, yeah. Thank you for being here.
Just want to thank the City of Phoenix on the subcommittee on it. Also, Governor Ducey that has shown a lot of light on the opiate problem that we have out there. And as Vice Mayor Pastor has said, we represent those people that are trying to be able to get back into community. I own a sober living house. It's a great sober living house. I provide a service to the community and to the people that are there. And we need to be able to help people like myself that's able to provide a service for the people that are coming through and trying to clean their life up. And that's basically what we do. So try not to regulate us out of business. That's all I ask on it. We need to be watched over. There's very little regulations, I realize right now, but the majority of all the sober living houses out there, they have their manager, they're run properly. I bought one time and the neighbor said, well, I didn't even know that was a sober living house. That's the way we like to be able to do it. There shouldn't be a lot of problems with the community, and in none of the houses that I know of are there any problems with the community on it. And I'm happy to work with anybody to be able to talk to people or work with things on them. It's a service that we are providing to our citizens of Phoenix, Arizona. I think it's a great service. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will say, I appreciate you being here. The meetings that I have been a part of with all of the neighborhood leaders that are here, I think agree with, in fact, that's been brought up. There are some people who are doing this correctly. You know, we have to get everyone compliant because I will tell you, not everyone is doing it correctly. There are people taking advantage here. There are people impacting negatively our neighborhoods because they are taking advantage. So if you're in the business and if you're doing a good job and you're doing it right, you have nothing to worry about. This is about getting everyone compliant, and this is about, this is about, frankly, pushing people out of the business if they're not doing it correctly. And so I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you voicing your concern. But I will say that this effort, as I see it, is not about ending an industry that I think is providing a service. It is about weeding out the bad apples. I believe that's how I see it anyway. So the next speaker, Mr. Mark Lewis, marked in favor.
Good morning. My name is Mark Lewis, and my address is 2515 East Thomas Road in Phoenix. And I'm here representing my business partner and New Dimensions, who is a group home sober living provider here in Phoenix. And if I may, I'd just like to hand out a couple things for the council. I'm not sure that you got my letter last night. May I hand these out? And so we're here in support of the ordinance, and we agree with Councilman Valenzuela's comment that we're all here to hold everybody to a very high standard of behavior and activity and have codes of conduct and inspections and those kinds of things that we can do within the industry. And we support the ordinance, we support the setbacks. I have some conditions precedent to that support, which deals with, we don't really understand the 1,300-foot setback because we don't know where the maps are and we don't know who is where and what's going on with the setback. So we support the setbacks and we understand the concentration issue that is going on with the neighborhood issues, and we want to make sure that we deal with that appropriately. We look forward to working with you guys on the working group. We also want to suggest that we might want to grandfather some of these homes in who have been in service during the period where the city did not enforce. You basically have a very strange provision where you just kicked in May 15th, the 1,320-foot setback, but you have all these people that are operating homes in the interim. They're sort of in limbo land, and we need a reasonable accommodation for them. I think that's super critical, and we can put that in the working group. The other thing is I want to kind of emphasize the notion that there's housing associations that have inspection requirements and minimum standards and codes of conduct and agreements that they sign with the residents so that you can handle the discharge issues and those kinds of things that are very well suited for this industry. And I want to finally close, if I may, with the city of Jackson just entered in a consent decree on last Friday where the city was fined $185,000 for failure to provide reasonable accommodation for these kinds of group homes. And there's a number of your ordinances that match the city of Jackson's that the Justice Department found to be invalid. And so before you recommend this to council, I suggest that we have a legal review and meet with the groups and move forward on a diligent basis. So thank you. I'm sorry I took too much time.
No, thank you, Mr. Lewis. We do have our city attorney involved in this process as well.
Correct.
Can you, that legal has,
Sure, Councilman Valenzuela and Vice Mayor Pastor, this text amendment, staff has worked closely with the law department to develop the existing language that is in there today, and that language has met with approval of their review. We'll obviously have to work on a little bit of language based upon your direction before the full council, but we will work with the law department on that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Mr. Stevenson. JP Greco? Greco, sorry.
Hey, I'll be brief. Mark said a lot of I wanted to speak about. I'm here on behalf of myself. I actually went through a sober living home about 4 years ago. I've been clean from heroin and other substances for almost 4 years. Unfortunately, you know, this is, like Governor Ducey had just mentioned, this is an epidemic here. And it's something that's touched my life, and I'm sure I've touched a lot of lives in here. And a lot of these sober livings and these treatment centers are on the front lines when it comes to that. And unfortunately, some of these regulations, I do agree with the grandfathering of certain houses just because of the reasonable accommodation to kick all these guys on the street when they're, you know, in a house already trying to get sober, get clean, and I know how tough that is. You know, I recently graduated college this year. I was able to go back to school, finish college, start my own business, and, you know, become a tax-paying member of society due to treatment centers and sober livings. So I just do ask for that reasonable accommodation. I agree with the regulations. I agree that there's bad apples out there, but there's also good apples. And that's what I would say as far as the text amendment goes, to at least grandfather some of these places in that are currently in operation that maybe we're not aware of another house down the street, or not necessarily on the street, but close to them, that all of a sudden they're kicking guys on the street because of the enforcement. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. Congratulations on your many successes. And again, this is, you know, I think everyone involved, I'll speak for myself, I agree that, you know, this is a service. I'm also a firefighter. And I will tell you that when I arrived on a call, putting on my other hat for just a second, when I arrive on a call and I walk into a sober living environment, I can just being there, it's a different environment when someone is doing it presumably correctly. I mean, I don't walk, I'm there for a different reason. I don't ask for paperwork or whatever. but I've also been in an environment where it's like, there's something not right here, and that's just stepping 2 feet in, and hearing from our neighborhood leaders and so on. So this is not about removing an entire industry that is providing a positive service, because also as a firefighter, I do see up close and personal the epidemic that we're facing right now. And so congratulations on your many successes. I think we need to hear those types of stories as well. This is about just cleaning up the industry and getting people to do it correctly. So thank you. The next speaker, Linda Colino. Okay. Mrs. Colino just mentioned that her points are made by Mr. Graham and Mr. Spellman and several others, and is supportive, so thank you. James Watson, marked in favor.
I would just like to.
Would you like to come up to the mic, sir, so we can get your comments?
James Watson. I would just like to support the text amendment with modifications. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dane Kreiner? Is that right? Did I get that right?
My name is Dane Kreiner. My address is 2521 North Evergreen Street here in Phoenix. And I am absolutely in favor with a few modifications. And so I would hate to see, I would like to see us do a special, is it a committee, so that we can discuss this some more. I, like some of these other guys, got clean and sober in June of 2001. I'll be 16 years sober in a few days, and that's has everything to do with recovery housing. And I just would hate to see us throw the baby out with the bathwater with an epidemic in this country that is killing 90 heroin addicts a day. A day. Please don't strangle us with too many regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Congratulations. Joseph Landon.
My name is Joseph Landon. I want to thank you guys for joining today. I apologize for my unprofessionalism if it's there. I wasn't aware of this until yesterday, being the owner of a sober living that's been in the Valley 11 years. I'm an alcoholic. I spent years of my life with my 16-year-old sister living in the canals of Phoenix with a needle in my arm, a person you wouldn't want in your home, in your city hall. And through the process of finding the sober living home and being able to stay there 3.5 years, I was able to gain 4 different businesses through the process of recovery. I'm a member of society today. I have my rights reinstated. I bring meetings into the prisons today for Arizona Department of Corrections, somewhere I was a resident. I feel that a lot of this talks about group homes, but there's sober living that's targeted. I have 4 houses through the valley. I've never had a complaint filed with the city. I've never had problems. What I've done is I've always followed the guidelines that were set by ASRA, the Arizona Recovery Housing Association. We have fire evacuation plans in place. We have fire extinguishers in place. We have residency amount of beds in place per bathroom. I've always felt that we were doing it right. And to hear about this just yesterday is why I'm here today. I also read the article about the Fair Housing Act, and I've been in contact with Steve Poland, who's very familiar with that, and I believe that ASRA has just hired him. I feel that we need more time as a group of sober living home owners to go over what's been done behind our backs in a way. For me to be the first time hearing about this, in the Valley 11 years, I find that absurd. I feel that there's a lot of discrimination, which is why I wouldn't mention the name of my sober living in fear that there may be some lashing out, some complaints filed to the city for something that I didn't do. I'm for the regulation. Over the past 3 years, I've seen a lot of competition pop up around me. Take my business model, residents of my house, start their own businesses, and we feel that they are not following those policies, that they should be put out of business, that they shouldn't be operating, they shouldn't be giving back to somebody when they have no knowledge of this disease that was recognized by the American Medical Association. This is a real thing. It does affect me on a daily basis. And that 3.5 years in sober living has made me the man I am today. That's all I got. Thanks.
Planning, thank you so much. Congratulations, and thank you for continuing to give back. Pay it forward. Thank you, sir. Dennis Kirk?
My name's Dennis Kirk. Thank you guys for being here today. You know, just as Mr. Landon stated, we just heard about this yesterday. You know, I am the director coordinator of his facility. I'm a 7-time convicted felon. I've been to prison 12 years of my life. But since facilities like this that exist today, I'm not I'm a productive member of society. You know, I get pulled over by a police officer and I'm taking clients, you know, somewhere, and they say, thank you for what you're doing today. You know, I get to impact lives today that I could not impact before. You know, I was the guy you couldn't trust me with $2. Now I'm the guy that handles, you know, all of our money for all of our sober living houses, and it's just incredible things going out there that we have going on today. You know, my family loves me. Biggest gift I gave my family was sobriety. That's the biggest gift anybody could ever give their family. It's all they wanted to do is go to bed at night knowing that their kid's okay. So I do support the amendment, but there should be some grandfather clause in there, because we've been around for 11 years and we're doing this thing right. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for sharing. Councilman Nowakowski?
And I just have some questions, is that we're establishing a working group. Who's establishing the working group and who's a part of that working group?
Chairman Valenzuela, Councilman Nowakowski, staff is establishing the working group. It is an advisory group to staff in terms of what we should bring forward. There's a multitude of staff that they'll be advising in that process, with the clerk's department, neighborhood services department on enforcement, you know, finance department on PAX license stuff. So we're bringing a lot of staff to work with our outside consultant and the working group. It is something that the dates have been established. If these folks would like to attend, they can certainly attend the meeting and speak. You know, it is meant to be something that it's not just a closed-door meeting. Others can come in, and there'll be a time for the public to comment and talk about things and provide input to the group.
I was just wondering if there's a way for each council member to actually appoint a person or two, because some of these testimonies, it's just incredible to hear how people's changed their lives, and at the same time, hearing how the community is willing to come together and make a positive change. And I know that some individuals that spoken are from my district, and I'd really like to make sure that we have good representation throughout the whole city and each district that's going to be affected by this new text amendment in the future, that we have somebody that's actually a part of this working group if possible.
And Councilman, maybe it's a good idea to give the councilman some of the names that are already in. You probably have people. These are, TAP is made up of community leaders, as what was mentioned, from all over the city. So it's a pretty impactful group that's been assimilated.
So there are 6 different TAP members, and they're from all over the city. There are also folks who are group home operators today, currently in the city. There's an attorney who represents group homes today that's part of the group. There is a parent who has had a daughter who has went through sober living homes because of addiction problems that she has had as well. And those represent the gamut of folks across you know, the city. I think we have a list right here with us, but I'm happy to provide the full list of that with you after.
Is there somebody that has lived in a group home and has been successful in recovery?
On the committee.
On the committee, yeah. Chairman Valenzuela, Councilwoman Pastor, we do not have anyone in that capacity at this point. We do have several external other partners like Salvation Army and folks from the state, as well as a representative from the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependency.
May I suggest that we look at that and possibly add someone that has experience group home living and knows the in and outs of a good or an excellent group home, a model of an excellent group home, to one that they just wasn't helpful.
Okay.
That's a good point, Vice Mayor. have a hard time believing that anyone with that very personal experience, who's been part of a good process, I think we've heard from a couple of people today, I'd have a hard time thinking that anyone would advocate for an operator who's breaking rules, who's bending rules, who's negatively impacting a neighborhood because of the way they're doing business. I don't think anyone would advocate for that. And so for that, I would just say, I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I hope we're all on the same page. Because at the end of the day, if people are breaking rules, breaking laws, skirting the rule, you know, that's not what we're looking for. I think obviously it's negatively impacting neighborhoods, and it's still negatively impacting people. I don't know how many people are not getting the treatment and the help that they are desperately asking for because they are involved in a group home or a sober living facility that isn't doing it correctly. So I think it's a good point. Someone who perhaps someone who spoke today who'd be willing to step up and be part of that. Councilwoman Williams?
As part of this committee, and you just said that you're going to be having these meetings this summer, I happen to agree with a person who has had a successful recovery is greatly admired and is real incentive to someone who's going through the process. And I think it is very important that at least some of the people that have shown interest here today are part of the conversation over the summer and has influence. But I guess my question is, how are you going to advertise when your meetings are? Are they going to have a notice online so that they can be apprised of when and where you're going to meet and how they can get involved?
Chairman Valenzuela, Councilman Williams, if they, after the meeting, we can talk to them and they can get on our email distribution list. That's how we have been communicating with folks. And so there are members of TAP who are on our group, but they're not part of the committee, but they're going to get notice and information about it. We will do the same to anyone who wants to attend those meetings. And we can look to put up information on our website as well, but it'll, you know, without people knowing to go there and look, it probably won't be as effective as getting on our email distribution list, and we'll publicize that, and we have space for people to attend.
Can you get something on the City of Phoenix, one of the very first pages that comes up, telling people that if they want to attend, get on your email list, and then at least they have somewhere that they've been notified that that's the appropriate way to get continuing meeting notices?
We'll work to make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Nowakowski?
You know, being the chair of public safety, I think a police officer and maybe even a firefighter should be sitting on that committee. Also, I would like to make sure that if there is group homes, a listing of group homes, or if there's a listing of sober living homes, that we actually create an email list, because people really don't check our website for stuff. I mean, and I think that we need to get the word out there so we have this conversation, so we can hear from all sides and make sure that we come up with the best text amendment possible out there. So one of the things I'm really concerned about is I want to make sure that all aspects are taken care of, from the individuals that have been through it, and they can talk about their experiences. And I'm not sure if group homes are preyed on by drug dealers or individuals like that. So I think things like that, I like to find out, and who better than individuals that have been through it and experienced it. So I think it's really important to have their experience on there. The other thing is the whole public safety also, to have their aspect in it.
Chairman Valenzuela, Councilman Nowakowski, we do have the police and fire department invited as, you know, we don't list staff as the committee members. It's really the committee that's advising staff, and staff is providing input to them on what fire does and what police do related to them. So they'll be part of our group meetings as well.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move, Mr. Paul Barnes. It's good seeing you, Mr. Barnes.
My name is Paul Barnes, and I'm a representative of the Neighborhood Coalition of Greater Phoenix. And I'm here to bring a little balance to this hearing because I am not supportive of this text amendment. And what I've handed you now is what happened when it was decided in 2015 not to enforce the current zoning ordinance. This is a cul-de-sac in Arcadia, 6 homes, and if you can look at it, you can see that the spacing, instead of the required ordinance of 1320, is only 91 feet. 91 feet. So you have 6 homes in that cul-de-sac. 2 of them are group homes, and the other 4 are really, really hurting. Their quality of life has been degraded. The value of their properties have been degraded. And because of the disability accommodation provisions, as recommended in the current ordinance, if you look at this, you could add 2 more group homes. 2 more group homes to this set. And that's per your current ordinance as recommended by the planning department. I'm concerned over the proposed accommodation provisions because of the fact that I just mentioned. And if you forget this particular cul-de-sac, this could happen anywhere over the city. Now, theoretically, you have a process that goes through an administrative hearing by the planning director or his appointed personnel, but there's no right of appeal to that process. And frankly, given the fact that this happened with no notice to the city council, no notice to the abutting neighbors, no notice to the village planning committees, there's a little concern about that administrative process, frankly. What's going to happen? So, okay, we're talking about this new ordinance. It goes back to the 1320 spacing, but so does the current zoning ordinance have that in it. It goes back to the, well, just let me finish if I can. I know I'm taking a little long, but I'm the only one opposed to it. So, it goes back to the 5, but so does the current zoning ordinance. So what are we really accomplishing by adopting this ordinance if all summer long we're going to have a group that's going to try to completely write a new ordinance? And as Mr. Graham has testified, one of the major points that's going to be considered is that disability accommodation. So that's my concern. What are we really trying to do? We have an ordinance. We just arbitrarily threw it aside, didn't notify anybody. That hurts. That hurts these people in that cul-de-sac. And by having these provisions per this ordinance as it's now proposed, you can have real problems. So I hope they work that out this summer, but then if we do, why adopt this ordinance now? What are we really gaining? Again, the current ordinance, 1320, current ordinance, 5. We don't need a new ordinance to do that. Thank you. Sorry it took so long.
Thank you, sir.
Alan?
Sure. Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, Councilman Valenzuela and Vice Mayor Pastor. This particular reason that the text amendment was, or the spacing requirement was not being enforced was because the advice from the law department was that it's illegal to enforce that without a reasonable accommodation provision. At the time, the city was under investigation by the Department of Justice. The Department of Housing and Urban Development had already investigated. We had responded to their investigation. They forwarded to the Department of Justice with a recommendation to pursue this issue against the city. And so that was why the enforcement was suspended. The reason for this current text amendment is because we need to put in ordinance that reasonable accommodation provision so that we can continue to enforce the ordinance. Right now, it's only happening via a letter of interpretation of the ordinance to say, if we're going to do reasonable accommodation, it's this provision that we will follow, which is the draft accommodation provision. And so we do need to have this to go forward. It provides the best opportunity for the city to balance all of these interests in the short term, recognizing that we're going to work on it over the summer and other ordinance or code changes that may come out of that as well, because a lot of this isn't just a zoning issue. There are other departments that will be involved in the long-term solutions.
Thank you for the explanation. Our last card on this item is Thomas Brown.
My name is Tom Brown, and I have 5 recovery houses, and I have never had one single complaint on any of my houses. I'm a founding member of AZRA, which is the Arizona Recovery Housing Association. We have a code of ethics, a code of standards. We inspect each other's properties. We hold ourselves up to a higher standard. We are self-regulating, which doesn't cost the city one dime. My housing does not cost the government or the city one dime. We take men that are broken and we make them whole. Like this man spoke. We take them from unproductive members of society that are costing the taxpayers and the government millions and millions of dollars, turn them into tax-paying productive members of society. I think it's naive for you to say that you can take a recovery home that has 10 beds and take 5 beds away and then ask to have sprinklers installed, have other regulations put in place, and expect that recovery home to stay in business. I think that's very naive. That's not going to happen. Most of those recovery housings out there, you know, there's a percentage of the people that come in with nothing, never pay anything, and then they're asked to leave. I've taken men with no shoes, given them shoes, given them clothes, given them boxes of food. Have men come up to me and been so appreciative because I gave him a pair of shoes, because I gave him a toothbrush and toothpaste. We are in the business of saving lives. This is the middle of an opioid epidemic. So, in the middle of an opioid epidemic, do we want to shut these houses down? Well, that's what you're going to do with these regulations. You're going to shut them down. Now, if you take the 10 and the 5, what do you do with those 5? Is there anybody here that come out and say, okay, you 5 guys, you're in the canal tonight. What are you going to do with those 5 people that you said that house has to have those people leave? Where are those people going to go? Where are they going to live? They're going to be homeless on the street, costing the taxpayers more money. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Glad everyone had an opportunity to weigh in on this issue. We're going to continue to work on this issue. We do have a working group that's going to continue to work through this issue. We do have a motion on the table and a second. Any more discussion from my colleagues? Any questions, comments?
I'd just like to see a list of that working group, and if we can add individuals to that working group that's not on there, that should represent some of the individuals that have been through the program, and maybe they can become advocates on that working group about how positive it is, and individuals that have managed some of the working groups. I mean, some of the centers that the houses that they can actually tell us about the great programs and how they're policed, and also about their code of ethics and all that.
That's a good point.
So, Chairman Valenzuela, Councilman Nowakowski, I think at least 3 of you have expressed interest in adding a couple of those folks to the group. We will ask to get some of those folks to be part of it as well.
As far as I'm concerned, this effort is not targeting those with the code of ethics and are upholding that code of ethics. This is about those who are not being responsible with this operation, with this business, with this industry. And it is hurting, it is negatively impacting our neighborhoods. It's impacting the people who are going to them for help. That's who this is impacting. And I haven't heard one person stand up today advocating for those bad characters. Not one. And so, and I will say that when we were going through this with many of the neighborhood leaders who are here today, that was mentioned. You know, this is not to target those who are doing a good job with this. And I don't know what word has gone out. I don't know if the message has gone out. And and you might want to consider who sent that message out. And for those in the audience, if you got a message saying that Phoenix is looking to end your industry, consider who the carrier of that message is, and you might want to stop reading their email or taking their phone calls. Okay, they're not helping the situation. We're about getting on the same page to move this city forward, and so that's what brought us here today. Now, we're about to take a vote, and everyone has had an opportunity to speak fairly. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out, and to our city staff, thanks for working so hard on this.
There's some messaging going on. Somebody needs to get a hold of.
You know where that came from. All right, we'll move on to item 11. Please, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and council members. I'm here today to speak with you about the continuing development of the Arizona Biomedical Corridor. To set the kind of tone of where this is located, this is in North Phoenix along the 101. It goes from 64th Street to 56th Street, is predominantly south of the 101. The tenants in the area are Sumco, a semiconductor manufacturer, Amex, a major financial services provider, and then Mayo Clinic. Mayo exists at this facility with a major hospital, major medical research and development, and most recently, their proton therapy facility, a $180 million facility that opened, making this a destination cancer research facility. The ASU parcel that you see on the screen in front of you is approximately 25 acres, and it's surrounded by an additional 600 acres of state land that we have focused through zoning on biomedical development. Just as a short background and history, in 2012, the City of Phoenix, Mayo, and ASU entered into a memorandum of understanding to create the Arizona Biomedical Corridor, to create a destination location for great jobs and biosciences and medical development along our northern corridor to really bring quality jobs into the area. In 2013, a master plan was created that identified some of the infrastructure needs. Later in 2014 and 15, State Land and Arizona State University entered into an agreement to conduct a land transfer, which gave Arizona State University approximately 24 acres just north of Mayo. In 2016, towards the end, Mayo and ASU announced their biomedical partnership, bringing exciting innovation in medicine to North Phoenix. Also, in that same announcement, Arizona State University announced their intention to build a 150,000 square foot health solutions center at that campus. When we look at the Health Solutions Center, which you see a rendering in front of you, you'll see that it is immediately east to the Mayo campus. The land between them is owned by Mayo for future development, and their 25 acres is immediately adjacent to the Mayo property. The building circled would be phase one, is proposed for phase one of 150,000 square feet and approximately a $75 million capital investment. As we work and look at this, what you see in front of you, an ultimate build out, we'll see approximately 1.5 million square feet of buildings and parking on this particular location. The campus will focus on things like biomedical engineering, healthcare innovation, science, research labs, and other innovative opportunities as a partnership with Arizona State University and in partnership with Mayo. As we look at the area, it still has strong infrastructure needs when we look at the bioscience, and we look at all of the Arizona State land area on that northern end of campus and in infrastructure needs. What staff would propose for consideration by this subcommittee is a partnership of public infrastructure for approximately $1.3 million of new infrastructure in this area that would be paid and reimbursed to Arizona State University with the construction sales tax that they would have on building the facility. So that would include a water line in Mayo. It would include a sewer line that would service not only this campus, but would service future needs in the area, would include additional street paving, upgrades to the ADA ramp, improvements in front of the facility so we do it once and don't have to come back a second time, would include a low voltage conduit from 56th Street to 64th Street. And what that would really allow is for those strong biosciences companies to tap into robust fiber in the area, which is their number one site condition when they're locating. In the future, we would be looking at opportunities for construction of some on-site infrastructure, but again, in public infrastructure, and that you see in for phase one, and it is proposed. And then you see future on-site infrastructure to complete all of the infrastructure for Arizona State University on their campus. What we would propose is coming back to see you in the fall. We are doing some additional analysis on some on-site public infrastructure where we have full determination and full analysis of the off-site infrastructure and have brought forward our recommendation for your consideration today. We would propose to come back to you in the fall after we've finished the analysis of the on-site infrastructure, which we estimate to be approximately $5 million, but have some additional work to do to come back to you to, again, determine how that would be reimbursed to Arizona State University with future construction sales tax dollars in amount not to exceed that construction through either the construction sales tax or the Strategic Economic Development Fund.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, as staff have worked through this, I will admit to a blind spot of mine, and that is I got very focused on the project that's immediately to be developed, and I lost a little bit of vision of the longer term, which is we have a transaction here that's going to take about 15 years to develop. And so Chris is kindly positioning what I didn't think of. And so the goal here is to daylight with you this. We have something in front of us that is going to be built. I am very confident with some help. They have to go do fundraising. They need to have a site ready to go, and the infrastructure helps support that fundraising effort. But this is going to be a 15-year plan that is going to end up having several thousand jobs, I believe, on the site. It's going to be great for this community. And we wanted to, and again, my apology, I wanted to daylight for you the fact that this is an issue that we think staff believes is important. It will continue to be valuable as they continue to fundraise for the next building after this building. And to be in a position so that we're ready when they're ready to be a partner, much as we have done on the law school, and as we've done with the downtown campus, and as we've done with entities like U of A on the biomedical campus here in downtown. So we take your direction, your advice, your counsel, but I wanted you to understand. Chris always leans forward, and it was my blind spot for not thinking about the longer term in this, and so we think this is important, but we take your direction.
And to speak to Mr. Blue's urgency of the certainty of building the building, ASU is in their procurement process now to secure their architect and construction manager.
Great, exciting. Councilwoman?
Well, first of all, Paul, you're forgiven. But coming from the north area, one of the things I always hear complaints about is everything goes downtown. Everything's way down there. And this has developed to be a very strong point of pride for all of us in North Phoenix. It has not only brought employment, it has the prestige of a Mayo Clinic. And we're very, very proud of it. And for you to come and talk about the infrastructure, I mean, that's such a basic need, and the amount, truthfully, that you're talking about in comparison to what we spend around this city is nickels, pennies, for something that has the potential to be world-renowned. And I am very, very supportive of this. Whatever you need for the infrastructure, it's the City of Phoenix's responsibility to see that water and sewer and that basic infrastructure is there. So I am more than happy to support this project, and thank you for working this with ASU and with Mayo.
Any other questions?
Move approval?
Oh, please.
I'll move approval of staff's recommendation.
Councilwoman Williams with the motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Any other questions?
What is the motion?
For staff's request,
Yeah.
recommendation for
For
the
the
infrastructure and continuing work with ASU.
for the 1.3.
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever it takes, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because Paul said he was daylighting or telling us about the future, and I'm not sure if that was part of this.
No, I'm saying what's here today, and I'm more than welcome them to
Okay.
come back this fall if they need more money.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I just didn't know.
No worries. And to add to Chris's notion, we and ASU, even in the last week or 10 days, have been talking in more detail about what the bigger amount of infrastructure is. And so, as they continue to hire design professionals and get precision, we'll be in a better position to articulate a better number. But right now, it's estimated to be approximately 5 million. That could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more of additional infrastructure related to streets, water, sewer, telecommunications infrastructure, pedestrian improvements, et cetera.
Great. Any world-class city has to invest in infrastructure and education, and I can't think of a better partner than that the city of Phoenix has had than Arizona State University. As we've seen the transformation of downtown, and what we are about to see up north, it's going to help broaden the footprint in Phoenix and in Arizona, for that matter, in the biomedical industry, and it's very, very exciting. So I'm absolutely supportive of this motion as well. So we have a motion and a second. We don't have any cards. We do have one hand up, so Councilman Nowakowski.
Yeah, I'd like to have some comments. Just basically, if you look at the map, we have the 101 on one side of the property and 51 on the other, and Scottsdale Road. So, and then you have all kinds of development all around the property. So the infrastructure that we're investing in this area, it's not like in the middle of nowhere. It's in a very populated area, and it's a growing area. So I think that I really want to thank ASU for their partnership with the Mayo Clinic and for really thinking outside the box and coming up with a healthcare solution in the future. I mean, I think that what they're doing here is going to be a model throughout not just the country, but throughout the world on how healthcare is going to be provided. So I just want to thank you all for being those innovators and thinking ahead of time and really teaming up with the Mayo Clinic, one of the best hospitals out there in the world. And we have people that fly in from all different countries just to actually be patients there at the Mayo Clinic. So the opportunity for our students are going to be amazing. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Mackey, for picking up Paul's slack. No, Paul, thank you for everything on this project and all projects. Okay, item 12.
Oh, I thought we were done.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I might have a potential conflict, so I'm going to sit this one out.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councilman Nowakowski is declaring a conflict, a potential conflict on item 12, and will not be participating. And this is the authorization to enter into development agreement for Fillmore mixed-use redevelopment.
Good morning again. Staff is here today to speak with you about information that we have on a possible potential development agreement that staff would recommend moving forward with for the development of the Fillmore property along 5th and 6th Avenue. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Deputy Director Eric Johnson to conduct the presentation.
Good morning, Chairman, council members, subcommittee members. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce the development partners that we're working with today. We have Jim Mahoney in the audience with Trammell Crow, as well as Paul Tuchin, and Matt Seaman, who's one of our another local developer that have partnered together with Metro West Development. They're in the audience if at the end you have any questions for them as well. But just to give you a quick background, I know you've all seen this site. We've been working on this site, assembling it for a number of years through a combination of land acquisitions, working with the county on land swap, as well as partnering with Juan Saldago and the Phoenix Industrial Development Authority to assemble the properties over time. We've gone through the RFP process. In November 2015, we issued the RFP for this site. In August, there was a community panel that was combined of the Roosevelt Action Association representative, two representatives from the development community and real estate community, and then a member of the Phoenix IDA, as well as representatives from the Neighborhood Services Department and the Planning Department were the recommending panel. The recommended proposer was the Trammell Crow Group for the High Street Fillmore project, as you'll hear about here in a moment. The goals of the RFP overall was to align with the community goals of the downtown strategic plan, the downtown zoning code for this area, trying to provide a number of public benefits, including breaking up of the super blocks. So obviously we're talking somewhere different that's here than in the other parts of town, but this part of town has very long blocks between Van Buren and Fillmore, so we wanted to break that up with the Taylor Street Paseo. As well as trying to make sure we focused on other community benefits, like providing opportunity to work with the school district and, of course, building with the codes and the Planning Development Department, the Street Transportation Department to create the public infrastructure we want to have down here. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Xanon Keating to tell you about the proposal.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. So some of the specifics with the proposal that is being recommended at this point, there's approximately, it's a mixed-use development, approximately 659 multifamily rental units. There will be 20 ownership townhomes also included on the site, and then there's some retail and office, approximately 17,000 square feet of those two as well. As Eric touched on, there is also the Paseo that's being proposed. This is an extension of the Taylor Street Mall that you see currently through ASU's site. This is a concept that's in some of the downtown planning documents. So this would be an extension of that. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to make a connection over to the ASU site, but currently we're taking this opportunity with the current proposal to get this section done. So it would be a roadway with an emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure to really provide that connectivity, the east-west connectivity that's missing in this part of downtown. So some of the benefits that would be seen with this proposal. Of course, there's new downtown housing. There's two different types as well, because there's the multifamily rental portion of that, as well as the ownership condo townhome sites that would be included as well. There would be new jobs that would be associated with this. Obviously, a number of construction jobs. This is a fairly large project, approximately 500 construction jobs, as well as 60 permanent jobs would be associated with the project as well. New capital investment in downtown, approximately $140 million worth of capital investment is expected. New property tax revenue. These sites have been off of the property tax rolls for many years at this point. And so these would put these back on the tax rolls and increase property tax revenues. And then, of course, the new infrastructure, the new connectivity east-west, new bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, not just along the Paseo, but the proposed development would include some infrastructure on the other streets as well. So some of the proposed business terms, the sale price would be $10 million. Ultimately, the square footage price would be, we're gonna have to do a survey of the property to determine exactly what square footage we have out there, and then that will determine the price. It's looking like around $29, $30 a square foot, but the ultimate price, the total price is $10 million. Each phase, so there's two phases of the project. There's an east phase and then there's a west phase. In each, the east phase is the first phase, and then the west phase is obviously the second. The entire Paseo would be developed under that first phase, and the purchase price would be paid for by phase. So upon commencement of construction of each phase, they would pay for the purchase of that land at that time. The city has agreed to up to $3.1 million for reimbursement for public infrastructure around the site. That would come out of the tax revenue that would be generated by the development as well. And then the reimbursement for that would be upon completion of all of the infrastructure that's necessary during that phase, including specifically the Paseo. So they would need to, developer would need to construct the entire Paseo before any phase one reimbursements could take place. The city has also agreed to credit the land back, the land value of the Paseo back to the developer, since they will be dedicating that area actually back to the city as right away. So there would be credit for that as well. And then as far as the timeline for the development, the developer has agreed to commence construction within phase 1 within 18 months, and they would have 32 months to complete that construction. It's not. And then they would have a total of 4 years to commence construction of phase 2 after they are finished with phase 1, and then 32 months to complete that construction as well. There is an option as well to extend. They would have to pay for an extension on phase 2 for up to 2 years as well. We are asking for a recommendation of approval to enter into a development agreement for this, for the development, Fillmore mixed-use redevelopment. And with that, we're available for any questions.
Councilwoman Williams?
We had a couple calls in the office about a school. Could you tell us what happened or where it stands?
Absolutely, Chairman, Councilwoman Williams. The entire conception as we went through this process and the community work over the last 4 or 5 years considered sites with a school and without a school. The developer had recommended a proposal of a specific site for the school. In working with the school, we have decided that we will continue to work with them through phase 2 and allow them, since we have time, they need time to go out to their community, they need time to do some research as to what they would need if they need anything. So as we had discussions with the superintendent and several board members over the last short bit, they asked if we kind of talked about moving to the second phase and considering what could be built in conjunction with the development on the second phase.
Is that written in somewhere that's going to continue that conversation and they still have options?
Chairman and Councilwoman Williams, that conversation was just had with them very recently. We'll be working for that to have that comments come forward with your formal hearing on the 28th.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, you can absolutely give us direction that you would wish us to continue to pursue that dialogue and conversation.
So I would like that dialogue and conversation to be pursued, and in the dialogue, I would like written stipulations, or however it's written, but.
Are you making a motion to approve?
Sure, I make a motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We do have 4 cards. 2 wish not to speak. Eric, is it Bear?
I guess he's not
Doctor? Is there a doctor in the house? The handwriting? Okay. Marked in favor. One of the architects of downtown, Dave Kreider, DPI, marked in favor. And Paul Tuchin and Jim Mahoney, both marked in favor. Would you like to speak, or we have a motion? It's going your way. Things are good. Great. I have to say all that again because my mic was off. All right, so we do have a motion and a second. 4 cards marked in favor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We don't have any cards for the end of any requests from my colleagues for future agenda items. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.